911. Operators, what are some of the funniest things someone has called in for? Welcome to the video. Make sure to subscribe and watch until the end. Enjoy watching. Story 1. The woman was spinning in the middle of the road, covered with traffic cones, and from time to time she would salute invisible objects. Motorists drove around this strange sight, but she continued her ritual. It turned out to be drugs. She had stolen cones from a construction site and organized a personal military ceremony right on the roadway. A creative approach to the use of road safety equipment. Story 2. Corporate adventures with phone systems turned an ordinary working day into a crime mystery. Our company used to use the 911 number for external calls, an ingenious solution that created dozens of accidental 911 calls every day. When my finger jerked and pressed an extra digit, I found myself as a suspect in my own crime. The operator professionally but insistently asked me if I was trying to transmit a secret danger signal. Perhaps someone is holding you under duress and you cannot speak openly. My colleagues laughed around me. It's happened to everyone. You're not the first and you won't be the last. One experienced worker said that he had dialed 911 8 times in a year and now dispatchers recognize his voice. Oh, it's you from the 9th floor again. The company had been receiving complaints about random calls for years, and the 911 service was asked to change the dialing system, but the management stubbornly stuck to tradition. Apparently, someone in power believed that the daily laughter of colleagues over telephone adventures was more valuable than the time of dispatchers who patiently dealt with the next crime against corporate telephony. Story 3. A medical student was observing the dispatcher's work during her internship when she received a call about an aggressive animal in a shopping center. The woman called 3 times in 10 minutes because of the service dog. He's looking at me. I don't care that he is helping a person. He just licked his balls right in front of me. Each call became more emotional. The animal was threatening with its eyes, demonstrating indecent behavior and violating sanitary standards by the very fact of its existence. The student could not believe that someone was seriously demanding the arrest of a dog for its natural instincts, and the dispatcher patiently explained the laws on service animals for the 3rd time in a row. Story 4. The demonic activity on public transportation caused one of the funniest police calls in the history of our neighborhood. My friend had to explain to the police that he was being arrested for suspicious mystical rituals at a subway station. Some passers-by saw him practicing liquid dancing, a unique style where his hands move smoothly and hypnotically, creating the illusion of liquid. The concerned citizen decided that these rhythmic movements were of satanic origin and immediately informed the authorities about the witchcraft in the subway. When the police arrived, my friend was just demonstrating a particularly complicated combination to the music from his headphones, artistically twisting his wrists and creating visual magic with his fingers. The officers stared at the suspected sorcerer, who was enthusiastically dancing to an invisible melody for a long time before finding out the true nature of his ritual. I had to explain the difference between contemporary art and attempts to summon otherworldly forces, as well as the fact that creative expression does not violate any laws, even if it looks unusual to some people. My friend received an official apology and an invitation to a police charity concert. Perhaps they were hoping for a free exotic dance workshop. Story 5. The dispatcher received a call. I accidentally cut my pubic hair and had an allergic reaction. Don't ask how you can accidentally dye something that is usually hidden under your clothes. The ambulance left with allergy medication and probably a few additional questions about creativity in the field of personal hygiene. Beauty requires sacrifice, but sometimes sacrifice requires medical attention. Story 6. A pizza delivery man can't deliver the order because a chicken is standing in the road and refuses to move. For 20 minutes, he persuades it to move away, and I listen to this epic battle of wills. "Miss Chicken, please, I have to work," the guy pleads. The chicken ignores him. Finally, she walks off into the bushes as if she has completed her mission. A classic situation. Why did the chicken cross the road? To spoil the pizza for the courier. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check your answers. Story 7. The mystery of the identity of Jehovah God Moped was revealed when I arrived at a call as a medic. The man seemed quite sane but insisted on introducing himself by this strange name. The Spirit gave it to me this morning, and I really want to share it with everyone, he explained happily. The legal name was an ordinary one, but the spiritual transformation had happened just a few hours ago. He was so excited about his new status that he planned to officially change his documents. If all religious discoveries were accompanied by such creative names, the world would be a more interesting place to fill out official papers. Story 8. A male student called in a complete panic, reporting a threatening allergic reaction to marijuana. He described the symptoms in detail. I can't stop eating. I've already eaten 3 packs of chips, 2 burgers, and a pizza. I had to explain that this was a completely normal effect of cannabis, not a dangerous side effect. An hour later, he called back, "Now I've eaten 2 more chocolates and a bag of cookies. Is this an overdose for sure?" I reassured him that the only threat was a distended stomach and an empty refrigerator. She advised him to buy more snacks in advance and reminded him that the 911 service does not provide advice on nutrition while using psychoactive substances. The guy was very grateful for the advice and promised not to bother us anymore with bouts of uncontrolled eating. Story 9. The zoological knowledge of ordinary citizens demonstrated its limits when a medical student observed my work during my internship. A call came in about an aggressive, uncontrolled animal in a shopping center, and the woman began a detailed account of a service dog's attack on peaceful shoppers. He is looking at me with his predatory eyes. I don't care that he is supposedly helping somebody. It's just a cover. Within an hour, she called 3 times with new accusations. The dog was demonstrating aggressive behavior, wagging its tail, violating sanitary standards, breathing, and making sexual advances, licking its balls. Each call became more emotional. Now he showed me his tongue. This is an open threat. The student couldn't believe that adults were seriously demanding the arrest of a dog for its natural instincts, and I patiently explained the laws on service animals for the 4th time in a row. What if he bites the child with his tongue? The woman's imagination knew no bounds. I had to call the mall's security to explain the difference between a service animal and a wild animal, as well as the fact that dog gazing is not yet included in the criminal code as a form of psychological pressure. Story 10. An old lady calls, "I can't find my husband's gun." I ask her where she saw it last. "I wanted to hide it from him, so I put it in a toaster and took it to a charity shop." I repeat it to make sure. "You put the gun in a toaster and then donated the toaster?" "Yes." "Madam, we cannot help you here. Somewhere in the city, someone is making toast with extra adrenaline." Story 11. My son gave me the phone to play with in the store and accidentally called 911. My brother answers the phone. He works as an operator in our neighborhood. The kid just wanted to talk to his uncle, but we had to follow protocol. My brother told me later that it was the sweetest emergency call of his career. Children's accidental calls to relatives via 911 are a new form of family communication. Story 12. My head is stuck in the cat house with the cat inside. During the conversation, I hear, "Oh shit," and "Dude, I'm not having fun either." The caller is talking to the cat, who, judging by the sounds, is not happy about the cohabitation. The caller is using his Apple Watch because his hands are busy. An ambulance arrived and both of them were taken out, a man with scratches on his head and a cat with a psychological trauma. Finally, I saw the Apple Watch in a real emergency situation instead of another random call. Story 13. A 9-year-old boy called with a serious statement. He wanted his brother arrested for grossly violating the family agreement on sharing Lego. "My mom clearly said that we have to share, and he says he is playing with all the 1,000 pieces at the same time. It's physically impossible." The logic was ironclad. If a brother can't hold all the pieces in his hands at the same time, then he's lying, and lying is a crime punishable by arrest. For 15 minutes, I tried to explain the difference between family disputes and criminal cases, but the boy insisted on his point. He's a liar, a cheater, and a jerk, and you have to come arrest him. We had to contact the parents, who confirmed that there was no violence going on, just a normal sibling war over toys. We advised both boys on the importance of compromise and reminded them that the police do not intervene in conflicts over construction sets, even if they are very expensive. Story 14. Crazy Tuesday started with a call about a monster called a chupacabra in the western part of Orlando. The woman swore that she had seen the legendary creature and demanded an immediate patrol of the area. 2 hours later, a colleague who had been out for the day called from the same neighborhood. "There's a kangaroo jumping down the street." The policy of our department is simple. If people see something, we document it. It turned out that the neighborhood was attacked by a coyote with mange. No hair, skinny to the bone, it really looked like something out of a horror movie. A few years earlier, I had to call animal control because of a chupacabra in my own neighborhood, until I realized it was the same diagnosis, a coyote with no hair from a disease. Story 15. Within 1 hour, the same woman called 5 times to complain about a guide dog in a shopping center. "He keeps looking at me with his dog eyes," she was indignant. "I don't care that he helps a blind person, it's unsanitary." Each time I had to explain the laws on service animals, their rights to be in public places, and the fact that a dog's gaze does not violate anyone's constitutional rights. But the funniest thing was when she called for the 3rd time and said, "Now he licked his balls right in front of me. This is sexual harassment." I had to patiently explain that dogs' personal hygiene does not fall under the criminal code, and that natural animal behavior is not considered obscenity. By the 6th call, she was already demanding the evacuation of the entire shopping center due to a biological threat and threatened to sue all the dogs present for moral damages. Story 16. The boy knew that the broken phone could still call 911 and he used it. "What's up, facing the shit?" is his standard greeting. He repeats it 3 times until I say, "We've located you, the police are on their way." Pause. Then, "No, they're not. Your face is in shit." And he hangs up. The little rascal was smarter than our triangulation bluff. Story 17. The guy spent an hour coaxing a seagull in the park near Chipotle, thinking it was injured. When he tried to pick the bird up, it squawked. The guy panicked and started screaming about a heart attack. I hear screams, rustling wings, then silence and heavy breathing. "I think I'm okay, I'll call you back later." And he hung up. I still think about Stephen Chayka whenever I drive by that restaurant. Story 18. The working day in the control room began as usual. Coffee, reports, waiting for another call about cats and trees or domestic quarrels. But around noon, the phone rang, and a woman's voice screamed in panic, "I have a fish stuck in my ear." At first, I thought I had misheard her. Maybe in the sink or in the bathroom, but no. A real fish, a real ear, a real problem. For 15 minutes, I tried to find out the details of this biological mystery, but the woman just sobbed and repeated, "It's moving inside." The ambulance left with a full set of equipment, including otologic instruments, which are usually used to remove baby beads or insects. The doctors later said that it was the strangest operation in their careers. A tiny aquarium fish had somehow gotten into the ear canal while cleaning the aquarium. The woman leaned too close, the fish jumped. And this is the result. Both participants in the incident survived, but I still can't look at aquariums without shuddering. Story 19. Another masterpiece of human ingenuity. A woman called the emergency service because a small lizard had gotten inside her computer and was terrorizing the motherboard. When the technicians arrived and disassembled the system unit, there was indeed a tiny gecko sitting inside, which had chosen the processor as the perfect place to hibernate. The creature had arranged for itself a luxurious apartment with heating, RGB lighting, and the constant hum of fans as white noise for sleep. We had to carefully dismantle half of the PC's contents to evacuate the smart resident back to nature, where there are no such technological amenities. Story 20. The ornithological anxiety reached its peak during the air show when one particularly concerned citizen called to warn of an imminent disaster in the airspace. "There are so many birds flying with the airplanes, they will definitely collide." His voice trembled with worry for the fate of both pilots and birds. For an hour, he described in detail every seagull that dared to cross the trajectory of the fighter jets, imagining scenarios of airplane crashes caused by careless birds. What if a seagull gets into the engine? What if a whole flock blocks the pilot's view? His scenarios became more and more apocalyptic. The man even suggested organizing an evacuation of birds from the danger zone, or at least warning them of the danger through loudspeakers. I had to patiently explain that pilots are specially trained to fly near birds, and air shows are organized with migration routes in mind. But his concern was so sincere that I almost felt guilty that I had never thought about the psychological state of seagulls during the aerobatics demonstration. A true environmental activist who cares about even those who can fly better than most people. Story 21. A student begged for an ambulance because of an allergic reaction to grass. Symptom 1. I can't stop eating chips. I explained that this is a normal effect of marijuana, not a side effect. The guy calls again in an hour. And now I've eaten a whole pizza and 2 burgers. Is it an overdose? No, buddy, it's just a normal Friday night for a student. The only advice is to buy more food in advance. Story 22. Veterinary assistance through 911 became my specialty after receiving a call about a critical situation with a pet. The dog owner was hysterical after his pet had bitten a seagull in the park and started behaving strangely. My dog could die of rabies. You need to find the seagull, catch it, and have it tested, he demanded, not listening to attempts to explain that birds do not transmit the disease. For 40 minutes, the man described in detail the suspicious behavior of his dog. The animal allegedly looked at him strangely, refused his favorite food, and walked somehow differently. When I suggested going to the vet instead of organizing a hunt for city birds, he responded insultingly, "So you don't care about the lives of innocent animals?" He rejected reasonable advice to consult a specialist, insisting on a large-scale operation to find and capture the seagull for medical examination. When it was patiently explained to him that the 911 service does not arrest birds for laboratory tests, the furious owner filed an official complaint against the incompetence, cruelty, and indifference to the animal world of the entire dispatch service. Apparently, in his mind, we should have a special team of ornithological detectives with equipment for rapid analysis of seabird saliva. Story 23. My colleague told me about a call that made the whole shift rethink the idea of creativity in everyday life. A woman called the fire department with a request to burn down a building for training. It sounded noble. Someone wants to help train rescuers. After detailed questioning, it turned out that the building was actually a van. Then it turned out that the van was not her property, but was abandoned on her land. After a few more questions, the truth came out. It was the home of her ex-husband, who lives there and refuses to move out. She wanted firefighters to accidentally burn the van during a training exercise, thus solving a family problem. The department politely refused such charity, and the woman was advised to seek legal counsel instead of pyromania. Story 24. He was working as a technician when the dispatcher transferred the call. A man is stuck in an Under Armour t-shirt. His shoulder is dislocated. I arrive and see a man half in a sweatshirt, laughing until he cries. I wanted to drive myself to the hospital, but can you imagine how I would look behind the wheel with my arm out the window? Thermal insulation clothing turned into a prison for his upper limbs. Lesson learned: don't underestimate the resistance of sportswear. Story 25. One day, a colleague of mine received a call that changed her attitude towards sportswear forever. The man was begging for help because of an emergency with his sweatshirt. It turned out that he had dislocated his shoulder while putting on a tight Under Armour sports shirt, and now he was stuck with his half-worn garment and his arm locked. I would like to drive myself to the hospital, but can you imagine how I would look driving with my arm sticking out the window? He laughed through the pain. The thermal insulation cloth turned into a prison for his upper limbs, and his attempts to get out on his own only made the situation worse. An ambulance arrived with scissors and painkillers, and the man continued to joke even as they set his shoulder. Now I know why it's called compression garments. They really compress everything. The doctor said he was the most cheerful patient with a shoulder injury in their practice. A lesson for everyone: if your clothes don't fit easily, they're not the right clothes for you, but a joint trainer with unpredictable results. Story 26. A fish is stuck in a woman's ear. Yes, you heard right. a live fish, and a human ear. During my 3 months as a dispatcher, this was the strangest call I've ever received. No details on how it got there. It remains one of the great mysteries of my career. The ambulance arrived, and I hope that all parties involved in the situation survived, both the woman and the fish. Story 27. The most absurd call of the day. A man's head is stuck in a cat house with an angry cat inside. Throughout the conversation, I hear a mix of human and cat sounds. "Oh shit," changes to meowing, then back to, "Dude, I'm not having fun either." The caller is obviously trying to negotiate with his forced roommate. The caller is using his Apple Watch because his hands are busy keeping his balance so as not to fall over with the cat's home. The ambulance arrived with a wood saw and removed both parties to the conflict. A man with numerous scratches on his head from the cat, which apparently did not approve of such a brazen invasion of his personal space. It was the first time in my career that I used the Apple Watch for its intended purpose instead of making another accidental call while playing sports. Story 28. Medical assistance to pets via 911 became my forced specialty after a call from a dog owner who was experiencing a real psychological crisis. The man called in a state of near hysteria, talking about the mortal danger threatening his best friend. It turned out that during a walk in the park, his Labrador had bitten a seagull, which, in his opinion, was behaving suspiciously aggressively. The owner was now convinced that the bird had infected the dog with rabies and demanded that all services be mobilized immediately to find and medically examine the culprit. My dog has already started to behave strangely. She has refused her favorite food and is looking at me with a special look. For 2 hours, he described in detail the suspicious symptoms. The dog allegedly walked differently than usual, sneezed twice, and scratched his ear once, all of which he interpreted as signs of a fatal disease. When I patiently explained that birds do not carry rabies and that his dog was just tired after an active walk, the man replied insultingly, "So you don't care about the lives of innocent animals?" He categorically refused the sensible advice to see a veterinarian, insisting on a large-scale operation to detect, capture, and laboratory test all seagulls within a 5-kilometer radius. When patient explanations that the 911 service is not in the business of arresting urban birds for medical experiments did not work, the furious owner filed a formal complaint against the incompetence, insensitivity, and complete indifference to the fate of pets of the entire emergency service. Story 29. My friend was called by the police because of suspicious demonic activity at a metro station. It turned out that he was practicing liquid dancing, a style where the hands move smoothly like a liquid. Some passers-by decided that these movements were of a satanic nature and urgently informed the authorities about the witch rituals on public transportation. When the police arrived, my friend was demonstrating a particularly complicated combination of movements to the music from his headphones. The officers looked at the criminal for a long time, who was artistically twisting his wrist to the rhythm of an invisible melody before realizing that it was just a dance, not an attempt to summon otherworldly forces in the subway. Story 30. A drunk woman called an ambulance because she was being chased by a car with flashing lights. It turned out to be an ordinary ambulance that was going about its business in the same direction. She took it as a personal hunt and was sure that the medics wanted to kidnap her. Paranoia plus alcohol equals the strangest conspiracy theories about the emergency medical service. Story 31. Today, a man was screaming in panic about a monster at his son's window, a huge one with small human hands and a striped tail. The accent was so thick that he had to pass the phone to the child. "It's looking at me and has rings on its tail." The kid was trembling. Then I realized, and before I could turn off the microphone, I laughed. The family had just moved from the Middle East and had never seen raccoons. The dad calmed down when I explained that it was a common garbage panda, part of our wildlife. Now they know why they should not leave garbage outside. Story 32. The child regularly calls and tells me about killing gummy bears and something about strawberry tampons. I have no idea what is going on in his imagination, but it has become our signature entertainment content. Colleagues are already waiting for the next series of adventures with marmalade characters. Perhaps the boy is a future horror movie scriptwriter or just a very creative person. Story 33. The skill of describing suspects reached new heights when I asked a woman about the appearance of the man she was fighting with. He's ugly. Thank you, ma'am. Very informative. Now we are looking for the first unattractive man within a kilometer radius. The same day, someone called because of the suspicious activity of a neighbor. He takes too many state medicines, he needs more fruits and vegetables. Public concern for other people's health has reached a level where dietary recommendations become a reason to call the police. And the best of all was the case of the turkey that could not overcome the concrete fence near the highway. Motorists stopped to help the bird realize its climbing dreams. Story 34. Psychoactive substances created a new trend in medical consultations when a college student called in a complete panic, reporting a threatening allergic reaction to marijuana. He described in detail the symptoms that scared him to death. I can't stop eating. I've already eaten 3 large packs of chips, 2 cheeseburgers, a whole pizza, and a bag of cookies. This is definitely an overdose. I had to patiently explain that increased appetite is a completely normal effect of cannabis, not a dangerous side effect requiring hospitalization. But I've never eaten so much in 1 hour in my life. Maybe I have a stomach rupture. I reassured him that the only real threat was an empty refrigerator and possible financial difficulties due to excessive food costs. An hour later, he called again. Now I've eaten 2 more chocolate bars, a bag of nuts, and a jar of peanut butter with a spoon. It's definitely poisoning. I advised him to buy more snacks in advance and reminded him that the 911 service does not provide nutritional advice on soft drug use. The guy was very grateful for the professional advice and promised to be better prepared for medical procedures next time, having enough food and delivery service numbers in advance. Story 35. On my first day as an intern, a situation occurred that changed my approach to work forever. A man calls and says, "I cut my penis." The intern replies, "You cut your penis?" The instructor slaps her hand. "He said he cut his hand. Don't be a pervert." After 10 seconds, the man continues, "Yes, I put on a condom that was too small. I had to cut it open, and I cut my penis with scissors." The instructor could hardly contain her laughter, and the trainee learned a lesson about the importance of listening carefully. Sometimes the first impression is the most accurate, even if it seems absurd. Story 36. The literature of the absurd took on a new chapter when an elderly lady approached me with a problem that stumped even experienced detectives. "I can't find my husband's gun." The panic in her voice was real. When I asked where she had seen the weapon last, a story worthy of Lewis Carroll began. "I wanted to hide the gun from my husband, so I put it in a toaster and then took the toaster to a charity shop." I had to repeat myself to be sure. "Madam, are you saying that you put a firearm inside an electric bread-baking appliance and then gave it to strangers?" "Yes, that's right," she confirmed, proud of her ingenuity. "Ma'am, I'm afraid we can't help you with this problem," replied her colleague's dad, who took the call. Now we have a legend in our department about the doomsday toaster. Somewhere in the city, someone is buying home appliances with the most unexpected bonus in the history of charity shops. Hopefully, the new owner will discover the surprise before he decides to make breakfast. Story 37. An elderly man called the police on Christmas Day. "I'm alone. Could you come have a drink with me?" The officer actually came, not only had a drink, but also helped set up a video call with his family. It was in Italy, but I wish such kindness happened more often. Sometimes the best gift is just a human presence around you. Story 38. My shift on New Year's Day started with a call from a woman who found her knee under a tree near a medical clinic. Not a whole leg, not a foot, just a knee. I tried to find out the details, human or animal, fresh or old, why she was sure it was a knee. "Well, it looks like a knee," was the whole argument. The experts arrived and found the remains of a chicken thigh after a picnic that someone had left near the clinic. But the woman described her discovery so convincingly that half the shift was ready to investigate the mysterious dismemberment case until common sense prevailed over imagination. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Story 39. Another night, a regular customer calls to complain about a service dog in a shopping center. He's giving me that suspicious look again. I explain that dogs generally look like that. They are not planning a world conspiracy. And now he's sniffing the floor. That means something. Yes, it means he is a dog. Some people see saboteurs even in the most loyal human assistants. Story 40. A boy calls and demands that his brother be arrested for refusing to share his Lego. Mom said to share, and he says he's playing with all the pieces at once. It's physically impossible. So he's a liar and should be locked up. The logic is ironclad, but the police don't respond to family conflicts over Lego. We call the parents and find out that everything is fine. Share your toys, kids, otherwise your brother will call the special forces on you. Story 41. One of the funniest calls in my practice. A drunk woman calls with an extremely important hypothetical question. Hypothetically speaking, if my boyfriend has a few grams of cocaine and I tell the police, will we be arrested? I reminded her that she was calling a recorded police line. I understand, but what exactly does the law say? I offered to send an officer for detailed legal advice. Great, let's do it. She cheerfully agreed and gave her address. The patrol officer arrived, had a conversation, but no arrests were made. After all the cocaine turned out to be purely hypothetical, and hypothetical drugs are not yet prohibited by law. The woman was very pleased with the legal education she received for free at home. Story 42. Her husband calls. Hypothetically speaking, if my boyfriend has a few grams of cocaine and I tell the police, will we be arrested? I remind him that he is calling a recorded police line. I know, but what does the law say? I offer to send an officer to consult with him. Yes, please. He gives me the address. The patrol officer arrives. No arrests. After all, it was hypothetical cocaine from a hypothetical guy. Story 43. Hallucinations under the influence of drugs reached a new level of creativity when a man approached me with a detailed description of the crime of the century. A man in a Pepsi suit stole my bank card and is now threatening me, the excited voice shouted. For almost an hour, the caller described an epic battle with the bottle man outside a local store, claiming that the costumed thief had not only robbed him but also insulted him with a motherly word. When the patrol officers arrived at the scene, they found our hero in the middle of a heated speech addressed to the Pepsi vending machine. The man was pointing his finger at the buttons, demanding a refund of $5 and an apology for his impolite attitude. The machine remained professionally neutral, not commenting on the allegations of theft and discrimination. It turned out that our client, under the influence of psychoactive substances, had been trying to get change from the machine for 3 hours, which had stolen his money without giving him a drink. The officers patiently explained the principles of vending machines, and the suspect in the Pepsi suit remained silent, demonstrating the highest class of professionalism in customer service even during criminal charges. Story 44. An archaeological discovery near a medical clinic almost became a local sensation when a woman called to report human remains under a tree. I found a knee, a real human knee just lying there. The panic in her voice was so convincing that I immediately called the police and forensic experts. For an hour, she described her horrific discovery in detail, the size, color, texture, and even speculated whether it belonged to a man or a woman. It looks fresh, maybe someone was killed here recently. Her imagination drew whole detective stories around the mysterious bone. When the experts arrived at the scene with all the equipment to investigate the possible murder, they found the remains of a chicken thigh after a picnic that someone had left under the tree a few days ago. The bone really resembled a human knee, especially if you looked at it from a distance and had a vivid imagination. The woman was a little disappointed that her discovery did not lead to a criminal case, but the experts praised her civic awareness and attention to detail. Half of our shift was ready to investigate the mysterious dismemberment case until common sense overcame detective fantasies and chicken bones brought us back to reality. Story 45. The paramedics arrived at a call. A man fainted at home and were met by a man in his underwear who was screaming, "Chicken breath! Chicken breath!" At first, the team thought he was on drugs until they found out that his wife was choking on an allergy to the chicken she was cooking for dinner. Now we have chicken breath as a code name for all calls with difficulty breathing. And the same doctor told me how during his internship at the hospital, they brought a man with a glass bottle of Coca-Cola stuck in a very intimate place. Failed while sitting down is the standard version in such cases, although physics says otherwise. Story 46. A nearby air show provoked one of the most disturbing calls in my practice. The man called in complete alarm. There are so many birds flying in the sky and the airplanes are so close they might collide. Imagine the scale of his worries, hundreds of airplanes performing aerobatics, and he sits and counts every seagull in the sky, imagining a plane crash because of a bird. I had to explain that pilots know about the existence of birds and have protocols for such situations. But his concern was so sincere that I almost felt guilty that I had never thought about bird safety during an air show myself. A true environmental activist, just a little worried. Story 47. Help, a man in a Pepsi suit stole my card and won't give it back, the caller shouts. He describes a detailed quarrel with the bottle man outside the store. The patrol policemen arrive and see our hero arguing with the vending machine, pointing his finger at the buttons. It turns out that he is high and accuses the machine of stealing because it does not return the change. The machine is silent and does not comment on the accusation, a professional in its field. Story 48. Help urgently! A man in a Pepsi suit stole my bank card and refuses to return it, shouted in an excited voice on the phone. The caller described in detail a heated argument with the bottle man outside a local store, claiming that the costumed criminal was threatening him and demanding money. When our patrol officers arrived at the scene, they found our hero arguing heatedly with a Pepsi vending machine, pointing his finger at the buttons and calling the machine a thief. It turned out that he was under the influence of drugs and had been trying to get change from the machine that had stolen his $5 for an hour. The officers patiently explained to him how the vending machines worked, and the Pepsi man stood silently and did not comment on the accusations, a true professional in his field who does not succumb to provocation. Story 49. I was called to the computer. There was a small lizard inside. The woman was hysterical. It's running on the motherboard. I arrived, opened the case, and there was indeed a tiny gecko sitting there basking near the processor. The cunning little guy found the perfect place to hibernate with central heating and LED lighting. We had to disassemble half a computer to evacuate the reptile back to the wild. Story 50. The most ridiculous family conflict in my career began with a call from a 5-year-old strategist who decided to use the justice system to resolve sibling disputes. Mom said we have to share Lego, but my brother says he plays with all the 1,000 pieces at once, the little lawyer indignantly said into the phone. The logic was flawless. If it is physically impossible to hold 1,000 small objects at the same time, then the brother is lying, and lying is a crime. He's a liar, a greedy pig, and a sneaky guy, so you have to come arrest him, the boy demanded with the confidence of a prosecutor. I tried to explain the difference between family conflicts and criminal cases, but he insisted on severe punishment. My mom always says that the police catch bad people and my brother is bad. For 20 minutes, he negotiated compromises and the importance of playing together, but the young human rights activist demanded only justice in the form of handcuffs. When the parents confirmed that there was no violence but only a normal struggle for toys, I had to give both boys a lecture that the police do not intervene in conflicts over construction sets, even if they cost half their parents' salaries. Story 51. A grandmother hid her husband's gun in a toaster and then handed the toaster over to a charity shop. Now she calls in a panic, "I can't find the gun." The whole story turns out to be bits and pieces. The gun is somewhere in the city in a donated appliance. "Ma'am, we can't help you with that," says the colleague's dad. Now we have the legend of the doomsday toaster. Someone somewhere buys a home appliance with a surprise inside. Story 52. Demonology in public transportation became a new chapter in the annals of absurd police calls when my friend was arrested for suspicious mystical activity at a subway station. A particularly religious passenger saw him practicing liquid dancing, a unique style of movement where the hands create the illusion of flowing liquid, and thought he was witnessing a real witch's ritual. This man is making some strange movements with his hands. These are definitely satanic spells. The witness panicked, calling the police to fight the forces of evil in the subway. When the police arrived at the scene, my friend was just demonstrating a particularly complicated combination to the music from his headphones, his fingers flowing smoothly into each other, creating a hypnotic visual symphony. The officers stared at the suspected sorcerer who was dancing enthusiastically to a melody invisible to others for a long time before deciding to come closer. "Sir, do you engage in mystical practices?" one of the patrol policemen asked seriously. I had to give a miniature lecture on the difference between modern dance art and attempts to summon demons, and explain that creative expression does not break any laws, even if it seems unusual to conservative citizens. My friend not only received an official apology, but also an invitation to demonstrate his skills at a police charity event. Apparently, they decided that a little magic wouldn't hurt their fundraising efforts. Story 53. The phone rang around midnight, and a child's voice was heard pleading for help. "My teddy bear is very sick, he can't breathe." The kid was crying so sincerely that at first I thought it was a real medical situation with a pet. For 20 minutes, I tried to find out the details. It turned out that the 5-year-old boy had found his mother's phone and decided to save his teddy bear friend, who was lying motionless under the blanket. When I asked him to come to his parents, he explained that their door was closed and he was locked in his room. In fact, the child simply could not open the door handle, but at that moment our patrolman arrived. The father popped out in his underwear, red as cancer. It turned out that the couple was celebrating Father's Day in a very intimate setting when their son decided to become an emergency vet. The officer reported over the radio, "Bear is in excellent condition, returning to base," and the whole shift laughed until morning at this story of an unexpected family interview. Story 54. The phone rang at 3 in the morning. A 5-year-old boy begged me to find his teddy bear. "He's sick and can't breathe," the kid sobbed. For 20 minutes, I convinced him to come to his parents' door, but it was locked. When our patrol officer finally got to the house and knocked on the door, the father came out in just his underpants, red as cancer. It turned out that the boy had called just as the parents were celebrating Father's Day in a special way, and Teddy was just lying under the covers and looked dead. The officer radioed in, "Teddy bear is fine, I'm coming back to the base," and half the shift was laughing until the morning. Story 55. The epic with the gummy bears and strawberry tampons has become our constant entertainment. The same guy regularly calls with stories about murders of sweets and strange things with female hygiene. No one understands the logic behind these stories, but they have become something of a radio series for our shift. Colleagues are already betting on what plot twist will be next in the fantasies of our young filmmaker. Perhaps he is the future Tarantino testing his ideas at the emergency service, or just a child with a very vivid imagination and access to a phone. Story 56. Domestic archaeology took on a dramatic turn when an elderly lady called with a problem that stumped even the most experienced detectives of our department. "Help me find my late husband's gun. I put it somewhere and can't remember where." When I asked about the circumstances surrounding the disappearance of the weapon, a story worthy of Lewis Carroll or Garcia Marquez began. "Last month, I decided to hide the gun from my grandson who was coming to visit. I thought the best place was inside an old toaster that we don't use. And then I forgot about it and handed the toaster over to a charity shop along with other things." I had to repeat myself for my own understanding. "Ma'am, are you saying that you put a firearm inside an electric appliance for baking bread and then donated it to unknown people?" "That's right. And now my son is asking about his parents' gun and I don't know what to say." She said this with such pride in her ingenuity in security matters that she seemed to have invented a new method of storing weapons. "Ma'am, I'm afraid 911 can't help you with this unique problem," replied the colleague who took the call. "Perhaps you should call a charity shop and alert them," she suggested, as if it were a common lost key situation. Now there is a legend in our department about the doomsday toaster. Somewhere in the city, someone can buy a home appliance with the most unexpected bonus in the history of charity shops, and we hope that the new owner will discover the surprise before the first toast is made. Story 57. The most heroic call of the week came from a man who spent an hour trying to save a wounded bird in the park near the Chipotle restaurant. He was so convinced that the seagull needed medical attention that he wasn't even surprised when I suggested calling the veterinary service. It's lying there and not moving. Maybe it broke its wing. Our self-proclaimed ornithologist was worried. When he tried to gently lift the bird for examination, it suddenly screamed at the top of its lungs, and my husband started screaming out of surprise. On the phone, I heard a real cacophony, the seagulls screeching mixed with human shouts, then the sound of beating wings, a short silence, and heavy breathing. "I think I'm okay, but I'm having a heart attack. The bird flew away." The rescuer was panting. When I offered to call an ambulance, he suddenly calmed down. "No, I think it's just a fright. I'll call you back later." And he hung up, not answering my calls. I still think about Stephen Cheka and his unexpected assistant whenever I drive by that restaurant. Apparently, the bird was just resting after a hearty lunch of chips from the customers. Story 58. Today, a man was screaming in a panicked voice about a monster trying to get through his son's window. The accent was so thick that I could barely understand half of the words, so I asked him to pass the phone to the child. The 7-year-old boy described the terrible creature in detail. "It's as big as our dog, but it has small human hands and a long tail with rings." Then it hit me, and before I could turn off the microphone, I laughed. The family had just moved from the Middle East a month ago and had never seen a raccoon in their lives. The dad started to calm down when I explained that it was a common garbage panda, part of our wild American nature. I told him about their habits of digging in garbage cans and climbing trees, and why you shouldn't leave food outside. The man was so grateful that he invited me to visit him for a kebab when I am ever in their neighborhood. Now they know that raccoons are not demons, but just very clever neighbors from nature. Story 59. A student lost $29,000 by sending naked photos to FBI agents for identity verification. First $4,000 from her current account, then another $25 from her savings account to clear her name of fictitious accusations. I sat and listened to this story thinking it was a prank until she started crying. Maybe it's really time to consider a career as a scammer. The scheme works amazingly well. Story 60. On Thanksgiving Day, the woman called 5 times asking for help cooking a turkey. "It's an emergency. My family is coming in the evening." I explained that culinary difficulties do not fall under the purview of the 911 service. She hangs up, calls again, and gets me. "There is only one operator. It won't work," I say. The patrol policeman arrived after the 4th call. She received a fine for misusing the emergency number. On Monday, she called to complain about me, the 2nd fine. Story 61. A culinary disaster of national proportions unfolded on Thanksgiving Day when a woman called 5 times in 3 hours asking for emergency culinary assistance. At 5 in the morning, when I was looking forward to a quiet holiday shift with coffee and old movies, the phone rang. "It's a real emergency. The whole family is arriving at 7 in the evening, and I have no idea how to cook a turkey," she screamed into the phone with such panic that the house was on fire. Patiently, I explained that culinary difficulties do not fall within the competence of the emergency service and suggested that she call her grandmother, find recipes on the internet, or buy a ready-made bird in the store. She hung up and called again 10 minutes later, hoping to get through to another, more understanding operator. "I'm the only one working, so this plan won't work," she warned her. The 3rd call was accompanied by sobbing pleas. "You don't understand. This is a disaster. Aunt Martha is coming from Texas just for my turkey." The 4th call included suicide threats. "I'd rather die than be embarrassed in front of my family." After the 5th call, the police had to be dispatched, and she was ticketed for misusing the 911 number. On Monday, she called again, this time to complain about me to the management for being cruel and unwilling to help an American family on a holiday, for which she received a 2nd fine. I hope the turkey still turned out to be edible. and that the family realized that love is more important than culinary skills. Story 62. A dog owner panicked after his dog bit a seagull and started behaving strangely. The man demanded to find the bird, catch it, and test it for rabies, not listening to explanations that birds do not carry the disease. "My dog could die. You don't care about the lives of animals," he shouted, refusing reasonable advice to see a veterinarian. When it was explained to him that the 911 service does not hunt seagulls for medical tests, he filed a formal complaint against the incompetence and cruelty of the dispatch service. Apparently, in his mind, we should have a special team of ornithological detectives to investigate interspecies conflicts. Story 63. Family diplomacy through law enforcement agencies demonstrated its effectiveness when my son gave me his phone to play with in the store and accidentally activated the emergency call function. What makes this story especially funny is that the call was answered by my brother, who works as an operator in our neighborhood. The kid just wanted to talk to his favorite uncle, but 911 turned out to be the fastest way to contact his relatives. The brother later said that at first he was scared when he heard the child's voice and the background sounds of the store, but when he recognized his nephew, he had to follow professional protocols. "Hi, Uncle. My mom is buying me toys," the boy said cheerfully, not understanding why his uncle was asking about his whereabouts and well-being in such an official tone. I had to explain that this was a work phone for real emergencies and that it was better to use regular numbers for family communication. The brother says it was the sweetest emergency call of his career, although he had to fill out a report on a false call from a minor relative. It has now become a family legend in the family about how children's accidental calls can connect relatives faster than normal communication, even if they have to use the emergency service as a free family chat. Story 64. Spiritual enlightenment took on new forms when I arrived at a medical call and met Jehovah Moped God. The man looked quite normal, spoke coherently, but insisted on introducing himself by this unusual name. "The Spirit gave it to me this morning during meditation, and I really want to share it with everyone," he explained with the joy of a child who has received a long-awaited gift. His legal name turned out to be John Smith, but his spiritual transformation happened literally at 6 in the morning. He spoke in detail about a vision in which the higher powers gave him a new name for a special mission on Earth. The moped symbolizes the speed of the divine word, and Jehovah is the source of wisdom, philosophized the newly baked Messiah. The man was so enthusiastic about his new status that he was already planning to officially change his documents and create a religious community of moped followers. He had no medical problems. He just wanted to share the good news with as many people as possible, including emergency responders. If all religious discoveries were accompanied by such creative names, the world would be a much more interesting place to apply for passports and driver's licenses. Story 65. Legal advice through the emergency service reached a new level of creativity when a drunken woman called with an extremely important hypothetical legal question. "Tell me, hypothetically speaking, if my boyfriend has a few grams of cocaine and I tell the police, will we both be arrested?" she asked with the seriousness with which constitutional amendments are usually discussed. When I reminded her that she was calling a recorded police line, she cheerfully dismissed it. "I understand, but I want to know what the law says. It's for educational purposes." For half an hour, she tried to get detailed legal advice about the articles of the criminal code, the responsibility of accomplices, and possible mitigating circumstances. What if I say I found the drugs by accident? What if I didn't touch them with my hands? What if it was really powdered sugar? When I offered to send an officer for personal legal advice, she enthusiastically agreed, "Great, I want to talk to an expert," and gave me her address without any hesitation. The patrol officer arrived, held an educational conversation about drug laws, but no arrests were made. It turned out that all the cocaine existed only in the hypothetical plane, and hypothetical drugs are not yet on the list of prohibited substances. The woman was extremely pleased with the free legal education she received at home and even offered the officer coffee for professional advice. Story 66. To be honest, I took my job as a dispatcher seriously until the day I had to coordinate the rescue of a pizza delivery man from a fighting chicken. The guy was on his way to make a delivery when his road was blocked by a determined laying hen who apparently decided to stage a personal strike against fast food. I listened to the epic negotiations for 40 minutes. "Miss Chicken, please, people need pizza." The chicken responded with haughty silence and defiantly spread its wings. Attempts to drive around failed. Beast. The bird moved strategically, blocking all maneuvers. When the animal control service finally arrived, the chicken majestically left the battlefield, leaving behind a cold pizza and a psychologically traumatized courier. A classic of the genre. Why did the chicken cross the road? To ruin someone's dinner plans. Story 67. On Thanksgiving Day at 5 in the morning, when I was counting on a quiet shift with movies and coffee, the phone rang. A woman was hysterical and begging for help to cook a turkey for the family dinner. "It's a real emergency. The whole family is coming at 7 and I don't know how to cook a bird." Patiently, I explained that culinary difficulties do not fall within the competence of the emergency service and suggested that she call her grandmother or find recipes on the internet. She hung up and called back 5 minutes later, hoping to get through to another operator. "Only I work. This plan will not work," I warned her. After the fourth call with the same requests, patrol officers had to be dispatched, who issued her a fine for misusing the 911 number. On Monday, she called again to complain about me to the management, for which she received a second fine. I hope the turkey still tasted good. Story 68. The New Year's shift began with a call that made me rethink the concept of creative approach to family problems. A middle-aged woman called with a request for charitable assistance to the local fire department. The conversation began very nobly. She wanted to donate a building for firefighting training exercises. How wonderful that people are thinking about training rescuers, I thought, until the details began. It turned out that the building was actually a camper van. Then it turned out that the van was not really her property. It was abandoned on her land. A few more questions revealed the full picture. It was the mobile home of her ex-husband, who had been living there for 6 months and categorically refused to move out after the divorce. The woman came up with an ingenious plan. If firefighters accidentally burned down the van during a training exercise, she would kill 2 birds with 1 stone. She would help the rescuers train and get rid of an unwanted neighbor. "It's a perfect solution for everyone," she convinced me. The department politely refused such charity, explaining the difference between training facilities and setting fire to someone else's property, even if it is on your territory. The woman had to look for less pyrotechnic ways to solve her housing problem through a lawyer instead of the fire department. Story 69. If someone were to compile an encyclopedia of human eccentricities, the story of the woman spinning in the middle of the road surrounded by traffic cones would definitely be included in the section Creative Use of Construction Equipment. Drivers called in for an hour describing the surreal scene: a middle-aged woman surrounded by bright orange cones standing in the middle of the roadway, monotonously spinning around her axis and occasionally saluting invisible objects. Motorists drove around this strange sight, and she continued her ritual as if she were performing some ancient ceremony. When the police finally arrived, it turned out that the woman, under the influence of drugs, had stolen cones from a nearby construction site and set up a personal military base right on the road. She was convinced that she was conducting an important operation to protect the perimeter and that the cones were her soldiers. Patrol policemen had to gently persuade her to leave the post and return the military equipment to the construction workers. The creative approach to using road safety equipment impressed even experienced officers. Story 70. The girl wanted to know who answers 911, so she simply called and asked, "Hello, who is this?" When she heard the answer, she grunted, "Oh, I see," and hung up. I had to call back. The father explained that his daughter was just curious. It was a good attempt to learn about professions, but next time it would be better to go on a tour of a fire station than to conduct a sociological survey through the emergency service. Story 71. A man dislocated his shoulder while putting on a sports shirt, and now the shirt is half on, his arm is blocked. He laughs and says, I would have liked to go to the hospital myself, but I would have had to drive with my arm in the window. This is a typical situation for those who buy clothes one size too small. Lesson for the future: if a jacket doesn't fit easily, it's not the right jacket for you, but a shoulder trainer. Story 72. A subscriber reports, a man with dreadlocks wearing blue Superman pants is lying in the middle of the road. Another clarifies, actually, those are pizza pants. That's what it means to witness important details. The difference between superhero clothing and a culinary print can be crucial to an investigation. Dispatchers quickly learn to appreciate the value of accuracy in describing victims' clothing. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Story 73. An archaeological sensation near a medical clinic almost became the start of a criminal investigation when a woman called to report a gruesome discovery of human remains. "I found a real human knee under a tree. It's just lying there, probably from a recent murder." The panic in her voice was so convincing that I immediately called the police, forensic experts, and even warned her about the possible need to involve specialists in investigating particularly serious crimes. Within 2 hours, she provided a detailed report on her gruesome discovery, describing the size, color, state of preservation, and even speculating on the victim's gender and age based on a professional analysis of the bone. Judging by the size, it's a man in his 30s, maybe an athlete. The knee is very strong. Her imagination drew whole detective stories. Perhaps a murder took place here and the body was dismembered and scattered around the neighborhood. When a whole army of experts arrived with all the equipment to investigate the possible crime of the century, they found the remains of a chicken thigh from a picnic someone had had under the tree last weekend. The bone looked remarkably like a human knee, especially when viewed from a distance and with a penchant for detective fantasies. The woman was somewhat disappointed that her discovery did not trigger a murder investigation, but experts sincerely praised her civic awareness and asked her to continue reporting any suspicious finds, even if they turned out to be barbecue remains. Story 74. The mother of a 5-year-old terrorist calls because her son has climbed onto the roof and cannot get down. She is screaming not because she is worried about the child's safety, but because last year he urinated in the ventilation system. "Hurry up before he pisses in the air ducts again." The firefighters arrived faster than Formula One. No one wanted to repeat the story of the house being flavored by the air conditioning system. Story 75. The ornithological heroism reached its climax when a kind-hearted citizen tried to save a mortally wounded bird in the park near the Chipotle restaurant for an hour. The man was so convinced of the seagull's critical condition that he was not even surprised by my suggestion to call the veterinary service. "It's lying still and not responding to me. Maybe it has a broken wing or internal bleeding." Our self-proclaimed ornithologist savior was worried. He even brought a towel and water from home, preparing for a complicated first aid operation on the wild bird. When the good-hearted Samaritan tried to gently lift the victim for a detailed examination, the seagull suddenly screamed at the top of its lungs, and the man screamed in surprise. On the phone, I heard a real cacophony. The bird's shrill screeching mixed with human cries of horror, followed by the sound of intense wing flapping, short silence, and heavy breathing. "Oh my God, I'm having a heart attack!" But the bird flew away, so it was healthy, the rescuer gasped, gradually realizing the absurdity of the situation. When I offered an ambulance for him, he suddenly calmed down. No, I think it's just a fright. Thank you for your concern, but I'm fine," and quickly disconnected, not answering my calls. I still think about Stephen Chaika and his unexpected helper whenever I drive by that restaurant. Apparently, the bird was just resting after a hearty meal and not suffering from injuries, as the caring passerby thought. Story 76. Another day in the emergency response service turned into a masterclass in detective work when a woman called in panic because she was being chased by an ambulance with flashing lights. For 20 minutes, she described in detail how a mysterious carriage was following her around the city, turning on the siren every time she turned. "They want to kidnap me for experiments," the woman shouted, while I tried to find out the location of this threatening ambulance. When our crews checked all the cars in the service, it turned out that the stalker was an ordinary ambulance that was going about its business in the same direction as our paranoid caller. The ambulance driver didn't even notice her existence, focusing on his own route to the hospital. Alcohol plus natural suspicion created the perfect cocktail for a conspiracy theory about a medical service that seems to prey on random citizens. I had to patiently explain that ambulances are usually busy saving lives, not kidnapping drunk drivers for mysterious purposes. Story 77. A woman called 5 times in 10 minutes because of a guide dog in a shopping center. "He's looking at me. I don't care that he's helping a person. He just licked his balls." Each time I explain that service animals have the right to be in public places and that the dog's personal hygiene does not violate any laws. On the 6th call, she was already screaming about unsanitary conditions and demanding the evacuation of the entire shopping center. Story 78. Technological terrorism has taken on new forms thanks to the ingenuity of one little rascal who knew the secrets of old cell phones. The boy used a hacked phone without a connection that could still call 911 and launched a real psychological attack on our service. "What's up, facing the shit?" was his standard greeting every time I picked up the phone. When I professionally answered with the protocol 911, "What is your emergency?" he repeated the same phrase with even more enthusiasm. After the 3rd repetition, I decided to apply psychological pressure. "We have located you. The police are on their way." There was a meaningful pause, and I almost believed that the bluff had worked, but then I heard a triumphant shout, "No, they're not! You can't find me! My face is in the shit!" And he disconnected with a triumphant laugh. The little tech terrorist was smarter than our attempts to intimidate him and was well aware of the limitations of the tracking system for phones without an active connection. We had to admit defeat to a 9-year-old hacker who was exploiting gaps in the telecommunications system for his own entertainment purposes. Story 79. A corporate office with a 911 dialing number for external calls is a disaster for dispatchers. My fingers trembled, I pressed an extra digit, and now I'm explaining to the 911 service that it was a technical error. The operator professionally clarifies that I am not trying to transmit a secret danger signal. My colleagues are laughing around me. It's happened to everyone. For years, the company had been receiving complaints about accidental calls, but for some reason it stubbornly refused to change the system. Apparently, someone in the management believed that the laughter of colleagues was more valuable than the time of dispatchers who received dozens of calls every day from reckless office workers.